What's up, my good peoples? Welcome to the Be Transformed podcast, where we're talking about ideas that stimulate wholesome thinking into identity, purpose, vision, and action. I am James Anderson, and today we're listening to a message from our BT community group. This is a group that meets twice a month online, and all these messages can be found on teambetransformed.com/community group. All right, without further ado, let's get into it. So today we're going to read through the story of David and Goliath, which is in 1 Samuel 17. Essentially, I'm just going to kind of read this, and then we'll talk about it as we go and see what kind of goodies we can get out of it. But so we're in 1 Samuel 17, and so I'll just start reading, and we'll get into it. So it says, "Now the Philistines gathered their armies together to battle, and were gathered at Soco, which belongs to Judah." So the Philistines invaded the Israelite territory. "They encamped between Soco and Azekah in Ephes and Dammon." You guys know where that is. "And Saul and the men of Israel were gathered together, and they encamped in the valley of Elah, and drew up in battle array against the Philistines. The Philistines stood on a mountain on one side, and Israel stood on a mountain on the other side, with the valley in between them. And a champion went out from the camp of the Philistines, named Goliath from Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. He had a bronze helmet on his head. He was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of that coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze. And he had bronze armor on his legs, and a bronze javelin between his shoulders. Now the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his iron spearhead weighed 600 shekels, and a shield bearer went before him." All right, so I looked this up. And so Goliath, as this reads, and as my research on Google tells me, his height was like 9 feet 6 inches, or 2.9 meters. He had his coat of chainmail was 125 to 150 pounds, which is heavy, right? 57 to 68 kgs. And then he had an iron spearhead. So it said like the shaft of his spear was like a weaver's beam, like this big, thick, round log, if you will, but a big old beam, and the iron spearhead weighed 15 pounds or 6.8 kgs. He's a big boy, right? I knew a guy doing some work in Fiji. I worked with this guy, and he was over 7 feet tall, which was tall, right? Like, we were doing some work out in the public, and everywhere we went, dude, everybody just like stopped and stared at this guy, right? Because he was unusually tall. Just not common. So everybody would just stop, like jaw drop, mouth open, drooling, just staring like, oh my gosh, this guy's huge. And they come and get autographs and stuff. And this was back in the day where I worked with this strongman team, and we would do feats of strength, and then we'd use that as like a evangelistic like tool. We'd put on this show, but then talk about Jesus. Well, anyways, in this show, we would bend steel bars. So not rebar, but like these other steel bars. And you'd put maybe 2 of them together, and you'd put it on top of your head, and you'd bend them into a U. Well, this guy, because he was so tall, his arms were so long, where he could do like, he would stack 3 bars together. And because his arms were so long, he had such leverage that he was able to, bend these bars. And so when I think about Goliath, he's wearing this chainmail coat, which is like metal woven together that's going to help resist arrows or swords trying to help prevent it from piercing through that into your body. And that weighing as much as it does, this guy's a beast. That with his spear being so big, the end of his spear weighing so much, dude has some strength, right? You got to be able to, if your tools or your weapons are causing you instant fatigue because it's so heavy, you wouldn't do very well in battle. So it's like this, all these things just kind of speak to how big and how strong this guy is. But here's this guy who comes as, opposition or an obstacle. And so starting in verse 8, it says, "Then he stood and cried out to the armies of Israel." So you have the two battle lines, the Philistine army, the Israelite army, and Goliath just comes and walks out of the Philistine army into the middle and starts to speak to Israel. So he cries out to the armies of Israel and says to them, "Why have you come out to line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine and you the servants of Saul? Choose a man for yourselves and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, you shall be our servants and serve us." And the Philistines said, "I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together." So he says, I defy the army of Israel, right? He's like, I don't even care about you or your army. Like, we're not even going to bother killing all of you. Just send me one person. So essentially I can kill him and then you guys become our servants. And so it says that when Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. So you have this big, hairy monster who comes out of the Philistine army and starts setting the terms, setting the conditions. This guy, who's like almost two people, comes out and says, "Give me one person," and only one person, and whoever wins, the other army becomes the servants. Well, when this happened, it says in verse 11 that when Saul and all Israel heard the words of the Philistines, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. So I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but you're trying to get about your business, trying to build your business, trying to build your life, trying to live on purpose, and an opposition happens. Challenges happen. People come and try to steal all your stuff. Challenges, obstacles, whatever. Something happens. And it sets itself against you, saying you shall not pass. Well, this is what happened, right? And so Saul and all the army were greatly dismayed and afraid. Dismayed means causing to feel distress. Similar words to dismayed are to horrify, shocked, shaked up, surprised, alarmed, frightened, thrown off balance, right? This guy came out here and definitely threw off some balance. Discompose, right? To be composed, or to stand, confident and put together. To discompose is to no longer be together. Troubled, bothered, rattled, distressed, disheartened, knocked sideways, right? Cause you to kind of to stumble backwards and forget where you were going and what you were doing. So what's interesting is that this guy just comes out and he sets the terms, and Saul and Israel get so focused on how big this guy is, they get so focused on the obstacle that they end up with tunnel vision, right? Like sometimes an obstacle can arise. You get so focused on it that you lose sight of perspective, right? Like you can't even remember where you're going. You can't remember what you're doing. You get into the microscope effect where you're staring at one thing, you crank up the power on it, and that one thing becomes so big that it's like it's the only thing you can see, and you can't see outside of it. And that's what happens to these guys. Now, Saul is king. Poor Saul. This guy never asked to be king. He never wanted to be king. He didn't have dreams of being king. This poor guy gets forced to be king. And so what happens is Samuel, he's getting old, and he gathers up all Israel and says, "Hey, look, I'm old, and my sons are with you." Well, his sons were idiots. They took advantage of everybody. They mistreated people who came to the temple to do sacrifices, and Samuel didn't do anything about it. So Samuel's like, "Look, I'm old. I'm about to bounce out of here, but you got my sons." Everybody's like, meh. He's like, "Listen, the people said, hey, your sons don't follow in your ways. We need a king. We want a king instead." And this was one of the dumbest things that Israel ever did. And so Samuel was mad, and God's like, "Listen, man, it's not that they're rejecting you, it's that they're rejecting me." So what God does is God gives them exactly what they wanted, which was somebody who looked the part, not somebody who was the part, just looked the part. And here enters Saul, this poor guy who didn't want to be king. So the only reason Israel wanted a king, right, is there was some nation was coming up against them, and it's like everybody else had a king, right? Every other nation, people group had a king, they had a leader. And even though God was that position, it wasn't the same as what everybody else had. And so that's what Israel wanted, right? They wanted somebody who was going to go and fight their battles for them, which God was already doing. But they wanted a person who looked the part, who was going to be courageous, who was going to lead the charge, who was going to make decisions and fight the battles. But I don't know if you've ever seen any of them war movies from back in the day. You know, the king is typically sitting on a horse behind the army while everybody else goes and fights. And but this is what they wanted, right? They wanted somebody who was going to make the decisions for them and who was going to lead them. And they wanted somebody who was going to fight for them, but like they didn't want the burden of having to make decisions. They wanted to pass the responsibility off to somebody else. And this was incorrect. So here comes Saul, right? God calls Saul. Saul's like, what the heck? God changes Saul's heart because Saul didn't have this kind of leadership inside of him. So God changes his heart. It starts off okay, but it quickly deteriorates, where God eventually just rejects him because he keeps doing things he's not supposed to be doing, because he's more focused on pleasing the people around him than he is in doing what he's supposed to be doing. So here you go. You got Saul as the leader. Everybody wanted a king because they wanted somebody who was going to be able to fight the battles for them. Saul, Goliath comes out. Saul is dismayed. He's disheartened, and he is greatly afraid. He doesn't know what to do. He doesn't have any courage. He's not trying to seek out a solution. So here's this thing that Israel wanted. It was like, okay, this king's gonna solve all our problems and satisfy all our fears. No, he's just as afraid as everybody else. So you got Saul who just can't actually handle this position. His son Jonathan was better equipped than he was. But again, God gave Israel exactly what they wanted, which was somebody who looked the part. He was a head taller than everybody. He was big. He was handsome, right? The look commanded authority. The attitude did not. So this is where we're at, right? We're with we're with somebody who has no business being in charge. Where Israel's in this situation where Goliath is dictating the terms. And what's happening is Israel is just letting him dictate the terms. Like, never let the enemy dictate the terms. We don't need to let the obstacles dictate the terms. The obstacle doesn't get to shrink your vision. It doesn't get to dictate your potential. It doesn't get to tell you what to do and how to stand and what you can and cannot do. But Israel and Saul do this, right? They let Goliath dictate the terms, and it's terrifying. They're like, here's this big, ugly thing who is telling us we're all going to die. And listen, we're all going to die. This is going to be terrible. And so this is where we're at. This is what is happening. And it doesn't get better very fast. So in verse 12, it says, now David was the son of that Ephraimite of Bethlehem, Judah, whose name was Jesse, who had 8 sons. And the man was old, advanced in years in the days of Saul. The 3 oldest sons of Jesse had gone to follow Saul to the battle. The names of the 3 sons who went to the battle were Eliab, which was the firstborn. The next was Abinadab, and the third was Shaham. David was the youngest, and the 3 oldest followed Saul. But David occasionally went and returned from Saul to feed his father's sheep in Bethlehem. All right. The Philistine drew near and presented himself 40 days, morning and evening. 40 days. So I don't even know what is happening, right? So 40 days, for one, is a really long time to do nothing. That's a long time. You got all these people who came to this one place. I don't know how many soldiers are out there, but 40 days is a long time to have food, water, right, supplies, and whatever. So they're camped out there for 40 days. So what's happening is that in the morning, everybody comes up to the battle line to do absolutely nothing. For 40 days. It is, what is it? It's March 15th right now. That's the end of April. That is a really long time to do nothing. But this can happen, right? You get some kind of big obstacle, some big, hairy, smelly obstacle that says, hey, this is as far as you can go and you can go no farther. And it can be scary to want to do anything. But here's what's 40 days, morning and evening, they're gathering in battle lines. Goliath comes out, says, send me a man. Israel does nothing. And then I guess when the sun goes down, everybody just goes to their tents and relax. Like, it's weird to see how that actually played out. Okay, so this has been going on for 40 days. So here's what happens. Verse 17, Jesse said to his son David, take now for your brothers an ephah of dried grain and these 10 loaves, and run to your brothers at the camp, and carry these 10 cheeses to the captain of their 1,000, and see how your brothers fare, and bring back news of them. Now Saul and they and all the men of Israel were in the valley of Elah fighting, I'm going to put quotes there, with the Philistines. So what's happening is that Jesse has 3 sons with Saul, and 40 days have gone by. It should have only took like a day to have a battle. You either won or you lost. 40 days have gone by with total inactivity, inaction, fear, retreat. And so Jesse's recognizing this is way too long for a war to be going on right? Where nobody's besieging a town. They're just out in the open fighting. Like, this should be done already. So Jesse's like, all right, we got to do something. He takes initiative. He sends David, hey, go find out what the heck is happening. So in verse 20, it says, David rose early in the morning, left the sheep with the keeper, and took the things and went as Jesse has commanded him. And he came to the camp as the army was going out to fight, quote unquote, and shouting for the battle. This is all huff and puff with nobody's house is getting blown down. For Israel and the Philistines had drawn up in battle array, army against army, and David left his supplies in the hand of the supply keeper, ran to the army, and came and greeted his brothers. Then, as he talked with them, there was the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, coming up from the armies of the Philistines. And he spoke according to the same words, so David heard him. And all the men of Israel, when they saw him, fled from him and were dreadfully afraid. All right, I think dreadfully is a couple notches above dismayed. Dreadful means causing or involving great suffering, fear or unhappiness, extremely bad or serious. Similar words to dreadful are terrible, frightful, horrible, terrifying, horrifying, ghastly, hideous, horrendous, and monstrous. Whew. You know, when you retreat twice a day for 40 days, listen, I don't know how long it takes to create a habit, but that kind of repetition consistently over time, you take something that's a little scary and you turn that into something that's like horrifying. This is what's happening. These guys have an obstacle that's so ugly that they can't get past it. They don't leave, but they also don't do anything. And so they're stuck in the valley of indecision and inaction. Okay, so it says in verse 25, it says, so the men of Israel said, have you seen this man who has come up? Surely he has come up to defy Israel. And it shall be that the man who kills him, the king will enrich with great riches, will give him his daughter and give his father's house exemption from taxes in Israel. Well, okay, so David has not been in this environment. This is a toxic environment, man, where just dread and terror is everybody's daily bread. When that's the stuff you're marinating on, this is bad. All your confidence is gone. All your identity is gone. You are shrunk down to nothing. But David just got here, right? He hasn't been marinating for 40 days in total fear and dread. So David shows up, sees Goliath, hears this speech, sees Israel retreating and running away, and then here's these guys talking about the reward for killing this guy. So David's seen an opportunity. So then David spoke to the men who stood by him, saying, what shall be done for the man who kills this Philistine and takes away this reproach for Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? Remember when Goliath came out, he said, I defy the armies of Israel. Give me a man that I may fight him. And when Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistines, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. So they went straight into fear and retreat. That was how they reacted when Goliath came out. David is like getting offended. David sees this guy come out, and he's like, who does this guy think he is, right? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? David's attitude is a little bit different. And so his initial reaction is different. He's getting offended. The other guys got afraid. The people answered him in this manner, saying, so shall it be done for the man who kills him. Now Eliab, his oldest brother, heard when he spoke to the man, and Eliab's anger was aroused against David. And he said, "Why did you come down here? And with whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your pride and your insolence of heart, for you have come down to see the battle." So his brother's like, "What the heck are you doing? You're nobody, you're nothing. How dare you pretend like you're going to be able to do anything?" Which was the whole attitude of everybody around there. But David said, he says, "What have I done now? Is there not cause?" Then he turned from him towards another and said the same thing. And the people answered him as the first ones did. So here you have David seeing this situation and getting offended, like kind of like a little bit that anger getting aroused. And then he's hearing people talk about the reward. So he's like, "Hey, what's that reward?" Right? A little incentive to go take some action. But now his brother sets himself against him and says, "Listen, what you're doing is prideful, it's evil, it's bad. Who are you? Look, you're not even taking care of your father's sheep, like you're shirking off your responsibilities." So David just ignores him and turns to somebody else. And it's like, wait a minute, what was that reward again? Okay, so then in verse 31, it says, "Now the words which David spoke were heard. They reported them to Saul, and he sent for him." I think this is interesting because David was talking out of like, that kind of like, whatever, like, it's like, "What did you say to me?" It's like that, you kind of, somebody says something, it's a little offensive, you stand up straight. That look on the face is like, what? The look you're looking at that person, the eyeballs, this is kind of David's posture. But he is still young. Like, he looks young. But even though he looks young, what he is saying is rare. Nobody's talking like this guy is talking, with conviction, with a little bit of passion and a little bit of frustration. So it's unique. And so people hear it. It stands out. It stands out because it's one in a million. So David gets brought to Saul. And this is what David says. He said, "Listen, let no man's heart fail him." Too late. "Because of him, your servant will go and fight this Philistine." Saul said to David, "You are not able to go against this Philistine and fight with him. You are a youth, and this is a man of war from his youth. You're young. This guy was once young, but when he was young, he was a man of war, and now he's got all these years on you. Who do you think you are?" So here again, David was in the crowd, said, "Hey, look, I could take, who is this guy?" And his brother's like, "Listen, you're wrong. You're prideful. You're evil. You have no responsibility." He's like, "Whatever." Then he gets brought to Saul. He's like, "Listen, I can handle this." Saul's like, "No, you can't." How many times does David, is he getting objections? He's getting told he can't do it by his own people. Like, not even forget about Goliath. He's not even fighting against Goliath yet. He already knows he can handle that. He has to fight against everybody else telling him he can't do it. But see, David's coming from a different perspective. So David knows what he can do. Saul doesn't. So David shows up and says, "Listen, I can take care of it." And Saul's like, "No, you can't." But David's like, "Listen, your servant used to keep his father's sheep. And when a lion or a bear came and took a lamb out of the flock, I went out after it, struck it, and delivered the lamb from its mouth. And when it arose against me, I caught it by its beard and struck and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, seeing he has defied the armies of the living God. Moreover," David said, "the Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine. And Saul said to David, go, the Lord be with you. Saul doesn't have any more fight in him, right? So he's just like, fine, whatever, just go. Just hopefully this works out. I don't know. I think it's interesting when David says, he said, the Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, he will deliver me from the hand of the Philistine. I think this is an interesting picture. For God to deliver David, David first has to put himself in a situation where he needs to be delivered. If that makes sense. David's like, listen, God's going to be with me, and he's going to go, and he's going to help me. He'll deliver him into my hands. But that's faith. That's belief backed by past experiences. But the only way for that to be true is first David has to put himself in the situation. David has to act first. And that's what faith is, right? Faith is it's belief in action. I believed, therefore I did, right? My faith is proved through what I do, right? So it says in James, it's like somebody will say, hey, I've got faith. And he's like, I'll show you my faith by what I do. Faith is proved through action. It's the I believed, therefore I did, right? And David's looking at Goliath and he's like, this guy is nobody and he's nothing. Look, he's big. He's big. And that's the only thing everybody else has seen. But David's like, this guy stands in opposition to God. There's no way he can stand. And watch, I'll go prove it. It's a different kind of attitude. It's a different kind of mentality. So in verse 38, it continues. All right, so David's like, listen, I got this. Saul's like, okay, go for it, man. The Lord be with you. Hallelujah. So Saul clothes David with his armor, and he puts a bronze helmet on his head, and he clothes him with a coat of mail, right? That chainmail. And so David fastens his sword to his armor, and he tried to walk, for he had not tested them. And David said to Saul, I can't walk with these, for I have not tested them. So David took them off. I think this is interesting because you got Saul, who's king, and he's the first king, so the whole king thing is new. But when you got somebody, especially David's younger, so you got the person of ultimate authority, and he's giving you his armor or giving you armor and saying, hey, go take this because this is what warriors look like. This is what warriors wear. This is what is normal. As a young guy talking with somebody with authority, it would be hard to kind of say no to that. But David knows how to work. And so David puts this stuff on. He knows what it's going to take to be able to sling a stone, to be able to do what he needs to do because he's done it before. And so he puts this stuff on, Saul's like, hey, this is what a warrior looks like. David's like, I hear you, but that ain't happening. So David takes off the armor. Then he took up his staff in his hand, right? That's a shepherd. He's got a stick. And then he goes and grabs 5 smooth stones from the brook and then in the creek, and then puts them in his shepherd's bag in a pouch that he had, and his sling was in his hand. David had to go as himself. He couldn't go as somebody else. He needed to wear his clothes, take his tools. So the Philistine came. Okay, so David grabs his goodies and then he draws near to the Philistine. So here in verse 41, it says, so the Philistine came and began drawing near to David. And when the man who bore the shield went before him, and when the Philistine looked and saw David, he disdained him, for he was only a youth, ruddy and good-looking. So the Philistine said to David, "Am I a dog that you come to me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David to his gods. And the Philistine said to David, "Come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field." So think about this, right? Because David's been fighting battles ever since he got there. So he was talking with the guys in the middle of the army when Goliath came out the first time. His brother opposed him. Then he goes to Saul and he says, "Look, I can do this." Saul says, "No, you can't." He's like, no. Here, let me tell you my story. Boom. Then Saul tries to put on his armor. He's like, no, I can't wear this, right? Like David consistently has to make decisions. He consistently pushes off people's objections to then move forward. Now, so he just fought these small battles, and now he's in front of Goliath, who now is trying to intimidate him, right? He's like, "Am I a dog that you come to me with a stick?" Right? Goliath has a stick, but it's made of bronze, and it's got a 15-pound or 6 kg iron spearhead on it. My goodness. And the Philistine cursed David and his gods, and the Philistine said to David, "Come to me, and I'll give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field." Right? Intimidation. Here's what I'm going to do to you. Right? Which that totally struck fear in all of Israel's minds and hearts. But here's David. Then David, this is verse 45, then David said to the Philistine, "You come to me with a sword, with a spear, and with a javelin. But I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you and take your head from you. And this day I will give the carcasses of the camp of the Philistines to the birds of the air and the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. Then all this assembly shall know that the Lord does not save with sword or spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands." Dang. That's a beautiful response right there. He's like, not only will the earth know that there's a God in Israel, but he's like, this assembly, talking about Israel, will know that the Lord does not save with sword or spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he'll give you into our hands. You know, it was said about David that David was a man after God's own heart. Saul was given a new heart. The challenge with Saul was that he reverted back to his old mentality and his old ways. He regressed. So even though God changed him, he still found a pathway back to the old pattern. David was good to go from the start. Verse 48, so it was when the Philistine arose and came and drew near to meet David, that David hurried and ran toward the army to meet the Philistine. Right? In these past 40 days, Goliath would move forward and the army would retreat. In this case, Goliath moves forward and David runs. He doesn't walk. It's not a brisk. I mean, he runs to go meet this foe. So then David puts his hand in his bag and took out a stone, and he slung it and struck the Philistine in the forehead, so that the stone sank into his forehead, and he fell on his face to the earth. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone, and struck the Philistine and killed him. But there was no sword in the hand of David. Therefore David ran and stood over the Philistine, took his sword, and drew it out of its sheath, and killed him, and cut off his head with it. And when the Philistines saw that their champion was dead, they fled. Now the men of Israel and Judah arose and shouted, and pursued the Philistines as far as the entrance of the valley of the gates of Ekron. And the wounded of the Philistines fell along the road of Sharim, even as far as Gath and Ekron. Then the children of Israel returned from chasing the Philistines, and they plundered their tents. And David took the head of the Philistine and brought it to Jerusalem. But he put his armor, the armor of Goliath, in his tent. When Saul saw David going out against the Philistine, he said to Abner, whose son is this? Abner says, I don't know. The king inquires. Then David returned from the slaughter of the Philistine. Abner took him, brought him to Saul with the head of the Philistine in his hand. Saul asks, whose son are you? David replies, Jesse. Everybody was terrified of Goliath. David cuts off his head with his own sword and is carrying his head around like a trophy. He's like, this is the thing you were afraid of? Oh my goodness. I just think, when I think about this story, I'm thinking about two kind of things. And I'm thinking about Saul and I'm thinking about David. And I'm thinking like there's a Saul and a David in each one of us. And I don't mean that in a negative way, right? Like when I think about Saul, in this case, I'm not thinking about the negative aspects, the fear, the indecision, the people pleasing, the refusing to do anything. That's not what I'm talking about. Saul was king. It was Saul's responsibility to seek out vision, to seek out a solution, right? Like if you don't know where to go, you don't know what to do. It's still our responsibility to figure it out. If we don't, we're going to end up like Israel and you sit there for days and months and years doing nothing, going nowhere, having the same results. The responsibility was on the shoulders of Saul. And again and again, he refused to take that responsibility on. For us, right, we are responsible for our lives. We're responsible for our families. We're responsible for the well-being of the people around us. It's on us to seek out vision. And when things get scary or they get confusing or we run into challenges, it's on us to seek out the solution. It doesn't mean you have to do it alone. It just means you need to talk to some people who can actually help you solve the problem. It's up to us to seek out these things, to do the work of a leader. That's what living on purpose is all about. It's up to us. It doesn't mean it's always pretty. Doesn't mean we always know what to do. But we don't cast off the responsibility. Right? So each one of us is responsible for our lives and our lives' outcomes. That is a fact. Right? Saul was letting life happen to him. Goliath came out there, set the terms, and Israel was like, I don't know what to do. So they became a victim of the situation and the circumstance. David did not. David was like, what the heck? He's like, this is not how this is working. I'm going to go kill this fool and don't even worry about it. Right? David had a different kind of mentality. And so that brings us to the second piece, right? There's a David in each one of us, right? Don't wait. Don't sit around hoping that a David is going to come and save you. You're David. That's inside of you. That warrior, conqueror mentality, who knows who God is, who knows, who he is, like that is inside of us. We don't need somebody to come and save us. That courage, that determination, that perspective, that fearlessness, that's inside of us. Sometimes you get these big, hairy, stanky Goliaths that say you can't go any farther than this. But that's when it's time to get sold on who we are, who God is, what this life is about. Freaking sling some stones and kill some giants. This life matters. What we do matters. The problems we solve matters. The people we help matters. What we do in this life matters. And it is very possible to end up like Saul and Israel, stuck doing nothing. But inside of every one of us, man, is the heart, the man or woman after God's own heart, who knows who they are, who knows who God is, who knows what this life is about, who has some vision, who works out the plan, and consistently, even when circumstances aren't always pretty, who consistently puts forth the effort to create the very thing that God is calling them to create. God is interested in our participation. That co-laboring reality is for reals. Guys, thanks so much for kicking it with us. Until next time, peace!